Elizabeth's husband, Zechariah, is even more significant in the line of priests in Israel, and would have been looked up to, again, as he's described as somebody in his old age who has been righteous, who has followed the laws and the decrees of God faithfully and blamelessly all these years. This was a truly great couple of people who followed God and did their absolute everything to make sure that they lived by his word and were an example to others. Even more so than his wife, Zechariah was in the priestly line of a man called Abijah. So if you go back to 1 Chronicles in chapter 24, you'll find the story of when David has already handed the kingdom on to his son Solomon to be king, and what he wants is for Solomon to have everything there and ready to build the temple, which Solomon does, but also to have everything ready for the running of the temple once it is built. And part of that was to choose priests from the line of Aaron, Moses' brother, the first high priest, who would be in charge on a rota system of 24 priests. So they go back to Aaron having 2 sons who outlived him and who their sons were, and then they draw lots, just like they do at the beginning of Acts of the Apostles, to select an apostle to replace Judas. And by drawing those lots, they select 24 priests to be on a rota basis in charge of everything that was happening in the temple, including the lighting of the incense to praise God, to make sure everything was done in order and with respect to God. These people had great responsibility in the eyes of David and Solomon. So 8th on the list of those whose lots are drawn is Abijah. And Zechariah is part of the clan or the family line of Abijah. By the way, Abijah's name is drawn 8th. 9th is drawn the name Jeshua, which is the same as Joshua. It's Jesus. You can read an awful lot into that when you understand that Zechariah and Elizabeth are going to be parents to John the Baptist. And so we come to Luke chapter 1 and this starting out story of the way that Luke tells the story of the birth of Jesus, which is that it's Zechariah's family of priests' turn to go and look after the temple in Jerusalem. So Zechariah and Elizabeth would have lived in the hill country of Judea, about 5 miles outside of Jerusalem, and then for his time period in charge on a rota of 24 groups of priests, Zechariah would have gone to the temple, and again by lot he is chosen to be the one who is in charge, taking the place of his ancestor Abijah. And so he goes into the temple while everybody else stands outside and prays. He lights or makes sure that the incense is properly lit, and those sweet smelling smoke, incense is rising up to God in his praise. And sometimes you might expect to hear something from the Lord if you were a priest in that moment. Zechariah gets a lot more than he's bargaining for. He gets a visit from the angel Gabriel, who tells him that his wife is going to become pregnant, and that they're going to have a baby boy, and they're going to call him John, and he's going to be John the Baptist, and that he is going to be the return of the spirit and power of the prophet Elijah. Wow. Amazing set of things. And Zechariah doesn't really believe that this can be the case. He says, "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man and my wife is well on in years." He's being polite about his wife not being able to have children. "How can I be sure of this?" he says. You could have stated that as, "Can I have a sign?" And the answer kind of is, you're in the temple, you're lighting the incense, everybody outside is praying, you are a priest in the line of Abijah, you should be expecting the Lord to speak to you, and he sent the angel Gabriel himself physically to come and tell you what's going to happen. So to demonstrate that God, even in the most serious of moments, has a sense of humour, he strikes Zechariah dumb, so he cannot speak. He has this amazing news of what's going to happen, and he can't tell anybody. And everybody is wondering what's happening when he goes outside. And when it comes to the end of his shift, he goes home to Elizabeth. And as I've already said, it doesn't say how they communicated, but surely he must have written something down. He must have made a sign like this saying, "You're going to have a baby." And I think that they would have laughed a lot in the way that Abraham and Sarah did when they learnt that they were going to have a baby called Isaac, who meant son of laughter. And it's not until the baby is born and everybody looks at him saying, what's his name going to be? They're expecting him to either give the name Zechariah Jr. or more likely choose the name of another priest in the line of Abijah to give him one of those names that are in the family. And to everybody's astonishment, he writes down the name John. And that's when he's able to speak again. It's a beautiful and kind of funny story. It ends with Elizabeth giving incredible praise to God for all that he's done and the favour that he's shown. And it is so easy to be tough on Zechariah because you're bound to compare him with what happens in the next chapter, the very next story, when the same angel Gabriel goes and visits Mary, who takes the news, which is far more astounding and difficult to hear than what Zechariah has heard. And she takes it so differently, asks a question, how can that be, and completely accepts the answer that it's going to be a miracle. So let us remember how righteous and how faithful Zechariah was, how long he had lived his life, and that right at the end of his life he has the joy of seeing his wife give birth to a baby, and this baby is going to grow up to be the one who is the voice crying in the wilderness that the Messiah is coming, fulfilling those prophecies of the prophet Isaiah. It is a wonderful and beautiful thing. And despite a moment of disbelief when he should have been excited, Zechariah is another person in the story that we should look up to and use as an example to follow.